heights of New York City, welcome to Inwood Art Works On Air, where we meet musicians, filmmakers, writers, theater makers, and artists of all stripes who make their home what we affectionately call upstate Manhattan. I'm your host, Aaron Sims, and today we welcome Manhattan Borough President Mark Levine. We're going to talk to him about his love for Uptown and so much more. Let me first welcome you, Mark, to Inwood Art Works On Air. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here today.
Aaron, I am thrilled to be here, and I want to thank you for what you have done for the arts Uptown and what you and the Inwood Arts team have created. It's been a beautiful center for creative life here, and you still have the best voice in radio, my friend.
Thank you very much.
Great to see you.
Got it from my dad, I think. The pipes came from my dad, that resonance from my dad. Let's just dive in, because what's great about having you on here, not only do you oversee the whole fiefdom of Manhattan, you're an Uptown guy like me, and just like me, you came from elsewhere. And what's special is that you decided to make your home here. So what is it about Northern Manhattan and this community that make you want to live here and be a double stress active part of this community?
I moved here 28 years ago to an apartment just across the street where we are right now at Pinehurst Avenue. And I haven't left since. And it's where our kids were born, and they went to PS 187 up the block. It's where we've raised our family. It's where I started a nonprofit, where I launched my political career. It's the community that sent me to the city council. So honestly, I would need 5 hours to talk about all that I love about this neighborhood. But I'll say briefly that it is one of the most culturally rich and dynamic communities anywhere in America. It's the heartland of the Dominican diaspora in the United States. It's just created just boundless vibrancy that you still feel here. It's a community with a long and storied history as a Jewish neighborhood, something of a Jewish Renaissance underway right now, but also important chapters as the home for Greek immigrants, Irish community, Russian immigrants, Puerto Rican and Cuban immigrants, and you still feel all of those beautiful strains coming together as you walk through the neighborhood. A really amazing art scene, which we'll talk about. Such a physically beautiful community with some of my favorite parks anywhere, Fort Tryon Park, Inwood Hill Park, down by the river with the Little Red Lighthouse. These are just spectacular destinations that we're lucky to have near us. A vibrant street life, full of small businesses. We haven't been chainified like a lot of other parts of the city. It's a small business community where you still have independent drugstores, where most of the residents are themselves, most of the restaurants are small businesses with local cuisine. I just love it. I feel very, very lucky to have been part of this neighborhood for 28 years and still counting.
Well, I mean, and it's what a great summation. I think that should be the Wikipedia entry for Northern Manhattan. I mean, you've been so, and the thing is, like, I think using as a jumping off point is that you recognize all this great diversity and multiculturalism in the community, and you actively want immersed yourself as a part of it. I believe you're a bilingual math teacher in the South Bronx for many years, creating opportunities for equality, for low income through the neighborhood Trust Credit Union project you did. I mean, you have a sense of inherent sense of care for your fellow man and this great diversity of our neighborhood. Where does your passion for community activism comes from? Because there's one thing to recognize what's going on. There's a whole other thing to do something about it.
Well, that was a very kind way of saying it. My father, who passed away in 2013, was a doctor and gave me a love of science, and my mother, who is still living and in great health, thank God, has given me more of a passion for social activism. She's a mental health worker by training, and those two streams have come together in me and driven my life in many ways. I studied physics in college, but didn't want to spend my life in the lab, so I became a science teacher in the South Bronx as a way to pass on my love for science to the next generation, but be very engaged in the world. And doing that work, I really connected with the families of my students, so many of whom didn't have any connection to the banking system. For them, it was loan sharks and rent-to-own stores. And so I started working with a group of fellow teachers back in the mid-90s to create a nonprofit that would help low-income families, immigrant families, access the financial system. And so we opened a community development credit union right here in Washington Heights called Neighborhood Trust that we launched in an old, formerly abandoned bank branch that had been owned by Chase prior to that, behind the bus terminal that folks who have been here for a long time will remember on Fort Washington Avenue between 178th and 179th. And we brought it back to life in 1997 as a community credit union. It grew to have thousands of members very quickly, made millions of dollars in loans, mostly serving people who had not previously had a bank account, mostly lending to people who would not have had access to maybe even a credit card. And very small loans, a few $1,000s, helping people buy their first home computer, start a home-based business. But you know, Aaron, the repayment rate has consistently been above 98%.
That's incredible.
It's an enormous testament to this community, to the power of giving people a chance. And I take real pride that the credit union is going strong today. No thanks to me. I'm just a cheerleader at this point. There's a wonderful team in place there. They've now moved a few blocks away. It's on 166 and St. Nick, a wonderful branch there, which people should go by. That's really the base that got me involved in Uptown politics, you know, having thousands of credit union members, my life as a former teacher. And I just became really frustrated with local government, felt local government wasn't doing right by the schools, wasn't doing right by community economic development. And I had friends who said, stop complaining, get into the arena and do something about it. So that's when I became a candidate myself, ran for city council way back in 2001, lost that race, ran for state senate in 2010, lost that race, ultimately stayed with it and broke through in 2013, had a great career of 8 years in the city council, and was able to win borough-wide office in 2021, and just have been loving representing every neighborhood of this fine borough of Manhattan. But Washington Heights is still home. Washington Heights and Inwood, it's where I got my start, and it's a very special place for me through to today.
Well, that's a great answer, and it shows. It shows it's a special place for you, and it's great for people to hear too. Like these resources that you've helped establish, and they're still available today.
Yes.
So that's a major thing too. And as we all know, art and activism are inherently linked. One might say all art is political, and making someone smile can be as disarming as attempting to challenge points of view or discussing someone's background or religion. But on a lighter level, is there any kind of coming from the science side? My dad was a science teacher. He taught for 50 years high school science, so I totally get where you're coming from and where the love is. I don't know how in the heck I got into the arts, but because my parents were teachers, I think they instilled that liberal arts education in me to be appreciation. But has there been a performance or visual art experience that has stayed with you, and has it affected you in a way you see the world?
Oh, there's been too many to mention. But a show that I saw not too long ago, I felt very lucky to see it before it closed. It's called Fat Ham.
Sure.
It was one of the many productions to emerge from the Public Theater and went to Broadway. I got to see it at the American Airlines Arena. And this is a show, for those who don't know it, it's sort of the bones of the show are from Hamlet, obviously the Shakespeare classic, but updated to the backyard of an African-American family in the South. And it touches on really profound themes of family, fatherhood, legacy, politics, very contemporary, but for me it was very powerful to see how the themes of a play written 500 years ago still resonate today. And it reminds me of the Classical Theater of Harlem, under the leadership of a genius, Ty Jones, that performs every summer at the bandshell at Marcus Garvey. That it's a similar idea. It's taking classical works that may have been written, in some cases, thousands of years ago. They go back to ancient Greek productions, finding the timeless themes, but reframing it for the modern world. Yeah. I find that to be an incredibly powerful model. I'm sorry that Fat Ham is no longer running. It's been a hard time for Broadway productions that seek diverse audiences with diverse narratives. Something that's very troubling to me, something I'm trying to address really through some of our policy levers, which we can talk about. But anyway, thank you for allowing me to talk about our show. I really enjoyed.
You betcha. I mean, Fat Ham, well, shout out to Marcel Spears, who was a classmate in Columbia,
Oh, wow.
who starred in that. And then also Carl Cofield at Classical Theater Harlem, also a classmate of mine, who's over there from Columbia at Classical Theater Harlem, who's doing great work. Totally off the cuff, let me bring it up. Not that we don't have the wonderful parks up here too, but we don't have the band shell that Marcus Garvey has. Do you think, and I'm not trying to do anything crazy for you park-loving people out there who want me to destroy your parks, do you think we could have a dedicated live performance space up here carved out? Small, maybe not like Marcus Garvey is ginormous as it, for you're saying outdoor classical productions and concerts.
I would love to have something
I'm not
like
trying
that.
to cause controversy for the Fort Tryon Park Trust folk or Inwood Hill Park, friends of or anything. But I think we deserve something like that up here too.
I would love a venue like that. Now we do have, not too far from here, a defunct outdoor amphitheater at Riverbank State Park.
Yes.
Which has got to be about the most glorious setting for an amphitheater. For people who don't know, it's right on the river. It's basically got the George Washington Bridge as a backdrop, and it's spectacular. It's in bad shape physically, and it would need some renovations to be restored for use. But I know that's not quite the same as Washington Heights.
It's all
Inwood.
right, but people should know about it. They want to use it.
Yeah, but yeah, let's think about spots we could put something together like that uptown. I know there would be no shortage of great productions and no shortage of audiences, and it'd be a wonderful addition to the artistic scene here uptown.
Yeah, I think so, because those levers were hitting my levers a moment ago when you said about that. It's people are always trying to find, renting a theater is the one of the largest costs you could possibly have. So, we can help people out outdoors or otherwise. Why not, right? Yeah. Speaking of, you guys at your Manhattan Borough President's office offer a lot of grants to help artists. Do you want to, if you have a quick shooting overview of the grants you offer artists to help them out, actually, to create their work?
Sure. I mean, the truth is that our biggest budget authority is on the capital side, which we have definitely used to support arts and culture. My office has tens of millions of dollars in capital money, and really probably only 1% of that on the expense side. But just to speak about the impact we've been able to have with our capital budget, there are some inspiring cultural projects coming together all over Manhattan right now that we've been able to help fund. A brand new reopened Victoria Theater on 125th Street. This is one of a series of grand venues dating from the height of the Harlem Renaissance that could have closed or could have been totally demolished. And the Apollo was saved from a similar fate. And now the Victoria is going to be part of the Apollo as an organization. It's reopened on 125th. It is spectacular. It has 2 black box theaters. It has other venues in the building for events. It's a great place to get a drink. There's a hotel. There are 200 units of affordable housing. I'm really proud of that project. We've helped to fund a new National Black Theater, which is being rebuilt now, also on 125th Street. It's going to be spectacular. The Studio Museum of Harlem is coming back. In Inwood, we have a brand new home for the People's Theater Project on 206th Street off 10th Avenue, which is just going to be an amazing, one-of-a-kind venue highlighting the perspective of immigrants and other marginalized groups who don't normally get to display their work in what's going to be really a modern, advanced facility. It's going to be spectacular. And other great venues around the world. So that's what we're able to do with capital money. Just on the expense side, so people know, the grants that we have are relatively small. They tend to be about $5,000 each. But for grassroots groups for whom a $5,000 operating grant would be meaningful, we really encourage you to apply. Those awards are generally made in the summer, but reach out to our office anytime. We love new groups that we haven't seen before. please, if you are running a nonprofit that could benefit from what's a relatively small grant, we would love to help.
And they're available on the Manhattan Borough President's website, so go check those out, folks. And we'll put the description of that in this episode, okay? Fantastic. Well, thanks, Mark, for highlighting those pieces of information. And I believe it's the Cultural Tourism Grant and the Manhattan Borough grant as well. So you mentioned housing, too, which I know it's huge on your agenda, affordable housing. With housing. It's and Inwood itself is, if you walk through Broadway, 207, Dyckman, even Sherman, if you look up, you cannot help but see the evolution in housing right now happening. And in theory, it should create a bunch of affordable housing opportunities, which includes opportunities for anybody, including local artists. And I know it's a major concern of yours and your agenda. For those who don't know, Mark was the founder and co-chair of the City Council's Affordable Housing Preservation Task Force. So can you give us your take on how things literally and figuratively are going along in these developments for housing for, obviously we're thinking about local artists and also what's going to happen with the new people coming in?
Look, we have a two-front battle in housing. We have to fight really hard to help vulnerable tenants remain in their home. And my proudest accomplishment in the City Council was passing a law that created a right to counsel for tenants facing eviction in housing court, making New York the first place in America to do that. It sparked a national movement. Now at least a dozen other states and localities have followed New York's lead. And in New York, pre-pandemic, it was a game change for tenants. 86% of the tenants who had a lawyer through the program were able to remain in their homes. Now, the post-pandemic world, we've seen a lot of disruption to that program. We have to fight to make sure that that right is still fulfilled. That is the ongoing battle to help vulnerable tenants stay in their home. But we have a second battle to help people who don't currently have a home find an apartment. Maybe they are currently in a homeless shelter or living doubled up or tripled up in an unsustainable housing condition. There are a lot of families in Washington Heights that are living doubled up. Maybe they're simply living in their family's home and they need to move out because they're starting their own family and it's not sustainable to stay in your family's apartment and you need to rent your own place. And for all of those folks, it's getting near impossible to find an apartment that you can afford in Manhattan and in other parts of the city. Average rents now are at all-time highs. The average rent in Manhattan is $5,000 per month for a market rate apartment. And if you specifically want to look at 2 or 3 bedrooms, it goes up from there. Those are rents that obviously a low-income family has no hope of affording, but even a bus driver, a nurse, a teacher probably can't afford those rents. And so, and for the kids of families growing up here, they have very little hope of being able to stay in Washington Heights or Inwood at those rents. And so how did this happen? And the short answer is we pretty much stopped building at the pace that we have historically in New York. The pace of new housing production has fallen off a cliff. And so we have so few apartments opening up. The vacancy rate now in New York City for apartments is 1.4%. That is almost as close to zero as you can get, except if you look at the rate for apartments renting at $1,100 or less, which is what's really affordable, the vacancy rate is 0.39%. Wow. I thought that was a typo. Now, we are bringing some affordable units online, thank God. You referenced a couple projects in Inwood. The location that is on top of the Inwood Library, just north of Dyckman on Broadway, that building is almost done. It will have a brand new library at the base, which is going to be great. I got to tour it recently. It's going to have 174 apartments up top, all affordable, 100% affordable, at extremely low rents. Studio apartments there are going to be renting for less than $400 a month. 2-bedroom apartments there are going to be renting for less than $600 a month. Great project.
Amazing.
Except we had 80,000 applications for those 174 units. We are seeing consistently across the board, when we do bring new affordable apartments online, 500 applications per spot. That's what we're seeing. The need is so dramatically beyond. So we're seeing bidding wars on market rate apartments. We're seeing 500 applications per unit in affordable apartments. We need more of everything.
Yeah.
And in Inwood, there are some projects going up which are going to help. You referenced, I think you said some of the buildings around 207th Street, 10th Avenue. Those are going to be, they're going to have a lot of affordable units there, hundreds of affordable units there. All of those affordable units, including the ones I referenced over on Broadway, have a 50% set aside for people who live in the neighborhood. So 50% of the units, there's a preference for people who live in this community board 12. That's going to help a lot. Not near enough. We need more buildings like that. We need hundreds of buildings like that all over the borough and the city. This is my number one priority. This is what I'm fighting for.
Right. Well, and thank you for just describing all of that, and actually the soup to nuts of this is the reality of we're all facing. Because if I'm gonna bring this back to an artist context, but as you said, it's a truck driver, it's a bus driver, you work, you're essentially, if you make under $100,000 a year, I'm just going to frame it that way, and I'm sure that's not the accurate number, and you guys can fact check me later. But if you're not quite affluent, and don't have two incomes coming in at a household, we'll just say it that way, you're going to have a very difficult time living in Manhattan. That's just the bottom line. Yes. Like if I'm coming from somewhere else, like you came from somewhere else, like a lot of us have come from somewhere else. I asked the questions like, you come, I mean, this nation, Ellis Island, this is the gateway for immigrants. And, where can immigrants go? Where are the next generation people coming in? The next people who are going to be standing on the shoulders of the people who are here now, yeah, and creating the legacy that we're giving them for the next legacy, for the next yes, generations. Yeah. And so, where are these people going to live when they come here? And this is the
question that keeps me up at night.
Yeah,
and
me too.
Increasingly, they are moving to the Bronx. The Western Bronx now has a larger Dominican community than Washington Heights. They are sometimes moving as far away as Pennsylvania, enduring commutes of an hour and a half or 2 hours. None of this is good. We want people to be able to remain in their communities. We want Manhattan to be a vibrant, diverse place like it's always been. I don't want this to be an island where you have to be a millionaire to get an apartment. Right. But that is possible. That could be our future unless we start building housing that Manhattanites can't afford.
Well, I'm going to kind of link the question up to that one, and you don't have to answer it with the same school of thought. I'm going to free you from the chains of affordable housing for a second. But you can, but using our neighborhood, we're talking about it as a metaphor and a catalyst for positive change and an evolution happening in our borough. If you could wave a magic wand and not worry about resources, money or space otherwise, what would you want to see happen for Manhattan?
We as New Yorkers understand that it's going to be tough to live here, but man, it shouldn't be so hard. And it has become too hard to find an apartment you can afford. It's become too hard to get your kid into a good school, too hard to get to work in the morning, too hard to find a public bathroom.
It's a hassle.
Yes. And my vision for the future of the borough is that regular families, middle-class New Yorkers, even New Yorkers who are struggling economically, have an easier time of just paying for the essentials here. And we have work to do on all fronts. We've talked a lot about housing. There's more to say on that topic. We have enormous work to do on transportation, where on the streets we have insane gridlock. Mm-hmm. In Midtown, the crosstown speed is 3.5 miles per hour during rush hour, which is walking speed, so it's slowing ambulance response time and police and fire response time. We have a crisis underground where the subways are suffering from century-old signaling systems, outdated stations, the oldest train stock in America, stations which are not elevator accessible, et cetera, stations which flood when there's a heavy rain. Access to affordable food is an enormous problem. Food is still more expensive and less healthy in communities of color, where there are fewer supermarkets, and that's impacting public health rates of diabetes and hypertension. And I wasn't joking when I talked about public bathrooms. We have fewer public bathrooms per capita than almost any other city in America. And to me, this is an equity issue, and it's a public health issue. And we're pushing a variety of policies to help fix that. I used to be chair of the Parks Committee when I was my first term in the council. And I think that trees are not just about pretty things to look at. They are key to the health of this city, to clean air, to fighting climate change, to resiliency in storms. They lower the temperature of neighborhoods on a hot day. They're just good for our mental health. That's why I joined with my fellow borough presidents. All 5 of us came together, including the one Republican, Vito Fossella from Staten Island, and we called for the planting of 1 million more new trees across the city, more street trees, more trees in parks, trees on NYCHA campuses, trees in schoolyards, trees on roofs. We can do this, and when we do, it's going to make New York a more healthy and equitable city. So I put a lot on the table. I'm fighting for all of it. It's why I come into work every day. I feel very lucky to be in this fight, and there's no doubt that Washington Heights and Inwood are front and center in all of these priorities.
And if you heard him, folks, if that magic wand was waved, boom, it would all be taken care of. But it takes a lot, and I will say it takes all of us. It starts with ideas, but we all need to pitch in, and you can do that also by joining your community board, your local community board, right, wherever you are. There's information out there about that, and it's through your office as well. You handle a lot of the appointees, I know that. So get involved is kind of like, if I can dovetail it and bring it full circle back to his earlier conversation. It's about observing your community, seeing the richness in it, becoming partisan activists. And activists doesn't have to be a dirty word; it can be a good thing. So go after it. So I just wanted to bring that all back full circle to you, and I also want to say thank you, Mark, as well, for all you do for the arts up in Northern Manhattan, because everything you said is directly relatable to what we do to produce in the arts and culture. We have to pay travel stipends. We have to hire people who are coming from the borough sometimes to work. We have to hire, it's about creating that access within your own local community, and how easy is that becoming? So the hassle you speak of for all New Yorkers is something we feel in Inwood, we feel in Washington Heights, of saying, we've always been in Inwood, particularly in Washington Heights, less so, but still, we're always venue challenged to have an opportunity, which also resources is that word I used earlier with you, is that the lack of resources and the hardship, I think was what you were saying earlier, is like the hardship and to be able to do what you can within your realm of limitations to create an equitable place for the arts to thrive, and let's just face it, New York City, it's the artistic capital of America. Challenge me for the world. And I think what you're doing and what you're doing, everything we're saying leads directly into creating an equitable place for arts and culture to thrive. And because I think it's all trickling down, including the congestion pricing and heavy bridge tolls and blah, blah, blah. So we thank you for what you're doing, and including getting behind like our Inwood Film Festival and our Filmworks Al Fresco programs, and being on our podcast. And is there one slight question I think we all are dying to know? Do you have an artistic hobby? Like, did you play an instrument? Were you in drama club? Did you have? Are you a visual artist at all? You like to doodle? Just curious. Do you have like a little hobby, a little outlet?
I'm going to share information that has never been revealed publicly before.
All right, folks.
I had a solo at Lincoln Center.
Really?
8 bars. In my high school choir. Yes, indeed. Wow. Also played the trumpet and piano and all of that. Do not ask me to perform, or it will be the end of my political career.
Well, do we know what piece it was from? It was 8 bars?
It was written by a student protege.
Okay.
It was the peak of my career at age 18. It's been all downhill there artistically. But but I do have a love of the arts.
Well, you
and,
know what?
Grateful to people like you who are continuing to make art, to inspire us, to challenge us, to bring us together. I get to do the easy part. I get to just enjoy it now.
Well, you know what? That's the other piece of the coin, or side of the coin, I should say, is that it takes an audience. We don't do it for ourselves. And so thank you for all you do, your activism, and also being a cheerleader for and the audience for arts and culture through us, Mark.
Thank you, Aaron.
You betcha. So once again, listeners, you're going to find the description of the Manhattan Borough President's website in this episode, so you can go and check out all the issues that Mark talked about, and also, importantly, the links to the grants. So go get those, okay? Once again, thanks to Mark Levine for joining me on this very special edition of Artist Spotlight here on Inwood Art Works On
Thank you, Aaron. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Me too. So this is Inwood Art Works On Air. It's where we meet the musicians, filmmakers, writers, theater makers, and culture makers who make their home here in Upper Manhattan. If you have a moment right now, please show us some love and rate this podcast 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. Many thanks to Hudson View Gardens for hosting us, and to Heightsites.com for all their Uptown promotional support. You can support On Air and all of our programming by making a donation to inwoodartworks.nyc/donate. And be sure to follow us on social media to keep up all that we do, which includes the Inwood Film Festival, Filmworks Al Fresco, pop-up art galleries, live performances, and so much more. Inwood Art Works On Air is proud to be supported in part by public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in the partnership with City Council, and Inwood Art Works programming is made possible by the New York State Council on the Arts with the support of the Office of the Governor and the New York State Legislature. From the top of Manhattan and the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much for tuning in. This is Aaron Sims for Inwood Art Works On Air.